Yes, so thank you. Well, Timo and I did a lot of work on writing this PowerPoint, but we'll manage in less than 15 minutes probably. That is mainly because Timo will take the biggest share of these slides and, well, I normally tend to have a lot of words. I'll try to be very briefly on this opening slide, because what this shows is actually how we have reviewed the research on validation, well, in a historical and sociological sense, and mainly also looking back at 8 years of Biennale. And what we see quite clearly is a slow but sure development towards a learning culture that has all attention for the learner as the primary actor in engaging in lifelong learning. The trend shows itself in 5 features, main features, in more contextualization, personalization and flexibilization of learning processes. We all encounter them in our own countries and contexts. Moreover, it shows itself in strengthening of the process-driven nature of learning, so more bottom-up, less system-focused and more focused on the learner, meaning that. And the growing use of validation methodology for being the lever in lifelong learning processes. So this development shows a shift from the analytical, mass learning and control-based learning processes that we all, well, have been accustomed to, towards a learning culture that is more holistic, personalized, customized, trust-based. So trust instead of control. It's in fact a shift from control of what needs to be learned towards a learning culture in trusting what has been and can be learned. So, this is for starters.
Yes, and what can we maybe say of the current status of research in validation? So what we heard even today and yesterday, so there's a lot of terminology and different kinds of meanings there. And we might take them as granted that they all mean the same, whereas they actually have different kinds of connotations. Then these are the listed kind of use for validation that has been also examined and studied quite a lot. But maybe we could say that if the original idea was maybe to shorten the duration of learning programs, so have we really achieved that, to be honest? Or when we say that we are valuing the existing human capital, so does it really happen in the case of disadvantaged groups or learners? So I think when we are practicing validation, maybe research can give us insight that are we really informed by the knowledge that we already have about validation, and are we making it happen? Then there are, of course, these very big organizations who have been setting the course of action. Originally, validation maybe started from the research perspective, but these big organizations have really taken over the power with these policy briefings and guidelines, which are all very important. But then maybe we also need to think about the quality of that information. That, for example, if we are just reviewing somebody calling to Ireland, that can one person answer on behalf of all Irish people about validation. So we clearly see that we need triangulation, we need different kinds of methods to really get an overall picture and a coherent view of the situation, not just by one single answer for an entire country. As we read about studies in validation, we see that maybe there's a saturation of information. What was originally seen as very important, for example, the methods. So I think we already know so much about the methods that it's kind of like just the nice to know content. What is then the good to know content is maybe that what are the outcomes of validation and do we really achieve them? And this is what we just actually heard from Thailand and the Latin Americas. But moving on to maybe must to know is maybe to get really to the basics, that why are we actually doing validation? And when we are doing the practices, are they really aligned to those original values of validation? And what we heard, a very remarkable presentation this morning from the mayor of Reykjavik and his own narrative. So social justice, social change, those are those really important factors, not just the economical perspective. Did he get more salary? But in his case, everybody saw that there were the much more important dimensions of being included in the society. And maybe, for example, in guidance, we should strengthen the social justice perspective, what we heard maybe yesterday in the research strand. Then moving on to the big placards here in the wall, that how are these things connected to the big changes in our society? So for example, the micro-credentials, open badges have been mentioned many, many times. Should we research that are actually they new forms of automated validation? So we just trust these elements and we accept them. Could that be possible? Or then the individual learning accounts, as we see maybe in France. So much of the production or content in there are by private producers. Can we see maybe an erosion of the role of public education and training providers in the individual learning accounts? And what does that actually mean maybe to validation? And then what we discussed a lot with Ruud the other day was that should we actually move into a setting of mutual modeling of validation practices between stakeholders to have a co-creation and service design approach? So we are always saying that we have the learner in the center, but should we actually have the teacher in the center and the employer in the center as well? But they should actually be doing something actively together and not just pressing the view of an education provider to everything. And then we discussed about the common language. How can we actually accommodate acquisition of a common language in our practices? Now that's a lot of things to ponder.
Yes, so to conclude, what we came up with, interpreting the research going on and still needed on validation, and especially on the function of validation, we perceive it as the need for a new social contract on learning. And this entails that the new social contract is actually needed to enable learning systems in education and training, and also in human resource management systems, let's not forget that, to adapt to the shifting learning paradigm from analytic to holistic, from top-down to bottom-up, from system-managed to learner-managed. With its call, this new learning paradigm, with its call for more personalized and tailored lifelong learning, facilitated by validation systematics. And this social contract is about learning to listen to the voice of the learner, which we are, which everyone is. So this is maybe the most important actor in lifelong learning processes. It's me. We can all say it ourselves. So to hear your voice, it's important that your ownership of learning is shared with the other stakeholders in learning processes, which are teachers, which are human resource managers, metaphorically. So the labor market partner, the education and training partner. And in this triangle, the dialogues or trialogues can mainly be focused with the assistance of validation methodology about content, form and meaning of learning taking place in an inclusive and equal way. and in an open and respectful atmosphere. And that's why we envisaged that learning takes many steps, and in this roadmap we can all fill in the gaps that are already missing in our own context, in our own holistic learning culture happening already. So thank you very much.
Thank you.